Hello and welcome to Railway Children's first virtual overseas Q&A. I'm Helen from the UK fundraising team and I'm about to hand over to Matt, who's with the programme team in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Matt started as Trusts and Grants Officer with Railway Children in January 2020 and since then has been pretty much confined to his home office in Wales, which is why it's great that he's finally got to visit our work on the ground. He arrived in Dar 2 days ago and is with East Africa Programme Manager Mary Gatama and Mary Mushi. So I'm going to hand over to Matt right now. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Helen. Yeah, you're right. I have been mostly confined to my home just outside Wrexham, where I think it's about 7 degrees at the moment. So it's very different here in Dar es Salaam, where it's about almost 30, and it'll get hotter at midday. Yeah. So yeah, but that's not the only reason I'm excited to be here. After being fundraising during the pandemic and not having a chance to actually get out and see our work close up, it's just so exciting to actually finally be here, and it's been a brilliant welcome from everyone here in the Railway Children Africa office. So Asante Sana, Mary and Mary, thank you very much for giving us your time and agreeing to have a quick chat and take some of the questions from our supporters. So first of all, do you want to introduce yourself, Mary?
Yes. So my name is Mary Gatama. I'm the program manager at Railway Children Africa, based in Dar es Salaam. It's one of the cities we are working in. And we also work in Mwanza, another city. So welcome.
So my name is Mary Mushi. I'm working for Railway Children Africa as Safeguarding and Practice Development Officer. So also based in Dar es Salaam. So you're welcome.
Thanks for your time again. So I'm going to kick off with a question from one of our supporters who asks, what are the main reasons in Tanzania for children to end up on the streets? And what is the single most important factor that could reduce this?
Mm-hmm. So there are a number of reasons. So I think the highest one that we've seen is neglect. So neglect involves maybe low parenting skills, so the children don't get the care that they need, so they end up on the streets. And that's also, there's also abuse and violence that children are running away from their homes. Poverty is, I guess, cross-cutting, because most of the families we work with, they're sort of low income. So it's a factor, but I think the highest is neglect, followed by violence and abuse. And also some children also drop to the streets because if they're at a school going age and maybe the parents don't have the resources to take them to the school, then they end up going to the streets as a way of survival. And then there's also peer influence, but that's very low. Yes.
So there's lots of reasons, basically.
Yeah.
So
reasons,
every individual child has its own reasons for being on the streets. So that's why the support has to be based around the needs of the particular child.
Yeah.
And so what are the, I suppose the difficult question to follow up with, given that there are so many, but what is the single most important factor that could reduce, these, I suppose, if you take neglect as one, what's the one factor that could reduce this from happening?
I think programs that focus on family strengthening, specifically providing parenting skills, because I think most people, parenting is actually, you need skills. There are skills that maybe most people don't have access to. And I think provision of parenting skills would really support in terms of reducing the number of children that end up on the streets.
Okay, great. I've got another question from a supporter, which is about the age range of the children that we work with. What is the main age range for the children that we come across in the streets?
So the majority of the children we work with are between the ages of 17 and 15. Those are the highest number of children that we come across on the streets. Also, there are youth that are between the age of 15 and 19. But I think the majority is the 7 to 15 age range. Those are the majority.
So really quite young then for, I mean, a 7-year-old on the street.
Yeah. And sometimes you get a 6-year-old on the streets. Yeah. So it's and you find that the 15 to 19, they're not actually the majority. So the ones that tend to drop on the streets are the 17 to 15, 7 to 15.
7 to 15, yeah. Yes. And is the type of support for those age ranges different?
It is different. So for the 7 to 15, the focus is family reintegration, because at this point, I mean, they're still attached to their families, and so the priority for us is not only addressing the immediate needs like medical needs, but also to trace their families, reunify them with their families. That's the focus for that age range. And for the older ones, I mean, the priority for them at that age is self-reliance. So for them being able to support themselves and eventually get integrated well in the communities. So we do provide vocational support and startup kits so they can be able to self-employ themselves or at least find employment. And that will help in their transitioning from living on the street to actually living in a safe place, affording a safe place to live.
Yeah. So what is the split in terms of gender?
So generally we get the majority are boys. We have higher boys on the streets than girls. However, at night, the numbers change. So the girls are not visible during the day because we do night street work, and the night street work purposely is meant to identify girls because the girls tend to come out at night. So what we've learned is that the girls that drop on the streets, they are quickly, there are people who take advantage. So they take them off the streets, not for support, but to really, abuse in terms of pimp them, or so some of them are being used for commercial sex work. And so at night, it's when you see the girls coming out. So when we do night street work, we're able to identify more girls at night than during the day.
So Mary Mushi, I've got some questions for you. How do project workers go about finding children who are at risk?
Okay, so the first thing is mapping out, understanding where we could find these children, and the street workers, because they are more experienced, they already know these places. However, when we go out during the night, as Mary was saying, during the day or during the morning, we speak with the children and we find out some of the issues that the children are going through. And they may also say, maybe we are not sleeping on this area now, we're sleeping on another area because of ABC. So the street workers now can start mapping out new spot areas and asking as key stakeholders on the streets, could be food vendors, any people who are very close to these children, asking them and trying to find out if there are any new areas where they kind of feel the children are sleeping. So mapping out is very key for the street workers.
Something that I noticed as we're flying into Dar es Salaam was that it's a huge city. So that mapping out exercise must be incredibly important, and the project workers must have incredible kind of in-depth knowledge of all the places that the street connected children must be. So it must be very hard.
Yeah, very true. So the mapping out, we are also supported. We have community champions. So these are volunteers from the communities in different places. So we work with them closely and we train them and we tell them in terms of what we want to do with the children, support either to return them with their families or support them while they're on the streets. So these community champions, sometimes they act on our behalf. If we don't know about a new location, if we don't know about a new child who has arrived, they can quickly call one of our workers. So that is how we get to know. So our street workers map out the areas, but we also have other people from the community that informs us about the areas.
Who do the community champions tend to to be? What kind of occupations are they in?
So the community champion are just normal people in the community, and they're doing just normal work. So, and they're mostly based, for example, some places like bus stand. So we all know bus stand. So when the children are arriving in the seat, they must come through the bus stand. Some of them are around the ferry. So some of the children come through the ferry. So these community champions are around this area. So it's easy for them to spot out new children that are coming. And the children sometimes form relationship with these people in terms of when they have challenges. So, and we enroll community champion to support because they are already doing this in the community anyways. Yeah. So, and we also work with night watchmen. So because most of the children sleeps on the verandas and in different abandoned houses. So the night watchmen are the very key stakeholders as well. So because sometimes when we go out on the street during the day and during the night, they could tell us of a location or where maybe children may be sleeping.
Yeah, so these are kind of security staff who have awareness of the children because they are up and around the street at the same time. And they must be adults that the children can trust sometimes, I suppose.
And maybe just to add, actually, how we identify the community champions is also we are supported by the children. So the children themselves identify people who are supportive to them on the streets, and then we go and formalize those relationships. And in some cases, we have policemen who are community champions.
And that's quite unusual because street connected children and police officers sometimes have a difficult relationship.
But there are those policemen maybe we have trained, but out of their own attitude, they like supporting children. So it's easy, and we connect with them, and they continue to support children.
Okay, great. I feel like we could talk about that subject for ages, but we've got to move on because there's lots and lots still to cover. So what time in the day do our project workers go looking for children to help?
Okay, so there are different days. So there's early morning, so around 6 a.m. So, and the reason why we go around 6 a.m. is because to see the children, how they're sleeping, where they're sleeping, and if there's any new child arrived during the night and perhaps may have slept with these other children, and if there's anything that happened during the night. And this during the daytime, so where we go to locations where maybe the children are baking, or they may be playing around these areas, or doing different activities. So we would go during the day, and we would also go during the night. So the night also is where we also find the opportunity to see where are these children sleeping. Is it safe? It's also an opportunity to build up the relationship we were talking about with the security guards and this night watchman around. So pretty much almost the same. We are on the street during the morning, day and night. And we go there like 6 days a week. So Monday to Saturday, but Saturdays could be halfways.
So not much rest for the outreach workers then, really.
So, but we do that in shift. But pretty much they are very busy.
Is it quite difficult for the outreach workers to build relationships with children sometimes? Because we sort of alluded to it in the last question that children sometimes have a difficult relationship with certain adults in the community. Is it hard to build the relationships? Does it take a long time?
So for some children, it might take a long time. For some children, it doesn't take a long time. And what the main skills that helps the social workers is just being there to listen and not judging. So because these children have left home for different reasons, and being on the community, so many people are already judging out and already calling them out names. But the street workers are just there to listen, and they show that we are here to understand what is your issue, can we help you? So this has been the tool that really helps the social workers to build that relationship with the children. And for some children, yes, they may take some time given the experiences they've been through, because maybe they've been neglected and abandoned several times with an adult. So they're wondering, how should I trust you? But they also get to learn that from other children that are on the streets. So because we are going on the streets regularly, other children knows the street workers. So the same children also talks to these children and tell what our social workers are doing, what the organization is doing. So that is how the other children also can create and develop that relationship with the social workers.
I'm sorry, maybe just to say something small in terms of the building relationship. When children are new on the streets, when maybe their first night on the streets, and we're able to go at night or early in the morning, it's easier to start building that relationship if we intervene early enough. Because the longer they stay on the streets, I think they experience a lot of mistreatment, and then they distrust adults. So the earlier we can intervene, the easier it is for us to sort of build that relationship.
And to stop or to reduce the risk of risky behaviours being entrenched as well, I assume.
Yes.
Because the longer children are on the streets, the harder it might be to support them to change that kind of risk-taking behaviour. So how do you go about, so the outreach workers go out, they find a child, how do you go about reunifying that child with its family?
Okay, so when the street workers goes on the streets and we continue building this relationship, the first thing is to understand their needs. So understanding their needs, if they want to either go to a temporary shelter, so we would suggest that to the child. So we could speak with you, understand what you need, but there's a safe place for you to stay for a while as we are talking. So some of the children may opt to go to a children's home, which is a temporary shelter, or could choose to go to a fit persons to stay there for a while. So during this time now, it's when now the family workers and street workers start building the relationship with the children, trying to understand the reason why they came to the street. So the first thing is understand why this child is on the street. And after we have understood, then we engage the child if going back is their interest at that time. So if they're saying we want to go back home, then we start tracing out the family, where this family is. We then have to assess and understand what is the situation at home. What the child has told us, is this what is happening in the family? Then through the assessment, we are able to know which areas to work on before we return the child to this family. So then we can start working with the family and show the interest of us working to work with that family and invite the child. So I would say that will be the process before we return the child home.
Is it sometimes quite difficult to actually find the family?
So in rare cases, some children may delay telling you or giving you the description. So because until they build that trust. Or until when they are ready. So to some children it may take a long time, not because they don't know where they're coming from, but it's just because they're not ready yet. But we have some fewer cases where either the children are very young, they really don't remember where they're coming from. And we have some where the child has mental disability or mental challenges, so they can't really describe and say where they're coming from. So it takes time to be able to identify. So I would say majority we trust the family.
And when you do manage to reunify children with the families, what do the parents say? Difficult question. I'm sure everyone is different.
So first of all, there's different emotions. So there's those parents who will cry. There's those parents who will say, we thought my child has died. And
really, sometimes they think the child has died.
That is very common in some families, because they're not aware where the child went to. And some of the children may have spent a long time on the streets, and the parents have been looking for them and they cannot find them. And some of the children, for example, in Mwanza, they are coming from a long distance in such a way a parent couldn't think my child could have been in Mwanza. So some of the parents are saying, so how did my child arrive there? Because I've never been to Mwanza, I've never thought of being into Mwanza. But they are always very grateful to see back their children. And their first question they would want, how did you get them? How the question of how did you identify my child? How did you find how did you find our address? How did you decide to come? So these are the first things that the parents are saying. So it's all the excitement of having their children back, and you would have some of the parents now starting to very curious to know what they can do to ensure their children remain at home. So it's different for different parents. Yeah.
And you just touched on the next step, which is to well, you tell me, what's the next step when a parent wants to kind of address the issues that led to the child leaving home? What happens then?
Okay, so because with us doing the reunification, our job doesn't end there. So it's understanding the needs of the child and the needs of the family and what we need to work on. So if the family is saying we want, for example, to build up a relationship, I want to build up a relationship with my children, or I want to be able to provide for my child so that they don't go back to the street again. So then this gives us the opportunity to know which areas we should work on. So we have different ways of working with different families. There are those families that need more intensive support, so in terms of for a long time, and they need therapeutic support given all the traumatic experiences themselves of being as parents. But there's those that maybe may need some economic support and some parenting skills, as Mary was saying. Then that will guide us then the way forward with this family. So we would have a care plan for a particular family given their needs, in what we are assessing and observing, but in what they are requesting us to support them with.
So what's the best part of your job?
So just the other question you asked. So just seeing the child and the parent meet, the emotions that goes, it's really, so I can't even find words to describe. So because imagine this, a parent who has been thinking maybe my child has died, but seeing the child back again. So this is very, it's the best part of my job, seeing the child meeting again with his family or her family, and them coming together and being happy again and wanting to stay as a happy family. I would say that is the best part for me.
I think also going back 1 year and the child is still at home and they're in school and they're doing well. I think that's because, you know, it's not just, hopefully it's not just that you've changed the lives of this child, but even their children. So even for the youth that we work with, so I'm hoping that we're breaking intergenerational circles where their children don't have to grow on the streets, they don't have to live in the streets. So that I think knowing that the impact goes beyond this one child or this one family.
It's sustainable.
It's sustainable. And
it's a real change.
And it's, I mean, it's one less child on the streets.
Well, that's incredibly powerful, I think. Thank you. So I've got a few more questions, and actually, Mary, you mentioned the fit persons in a previous answer. Could you expand on that? Tell us what's a fit person?
Okay, so maybe Mary could go first, then I will.
Okay, so fit persons, it's they provide alternative family-based care. So they're community members that have been identified and vetted by government officials, and they provide temporary safe place for children to stay. So we, in our project, we utilize the fit persons. So instead of taking a child to a residential center, you're taking them to a family-based care, which are the fit persons. And the fit persons, they provide a family-based care for that child until such a time we can trace their families, prepare their families to receive the child. Then you're able to take the child from the fit persons back to their families. So they do provide temporary based care. And I mean, the beauty of it is that even in terms of, so unlike being a child being in a residential center, a child is able to just experience family-based care at a time when they're detached from their original families.
So does that help to kind of prepare them for being reunified with their own family?
With their own families, yes. And also in terms of readjusting back to school, back to their families. So it actually, and the fit persons also, because it's a voluntary, they don't get any support from, let's say, the government. It's voluntary, so it's people that really want to support and provide for these children.
What motivates somebody to become a fit person and to take in a child that you find on the streets?
I think maybe culturally in our context, it's common for I mean, the community aspect that we have here in Tanzania, is that your child is my child. So people, when it's about taking care of the children, they are okay to support another child who is not necessarily their biological child. So I think that's where the motivation comes in, because there's no really support. I mean, there's no fee for being a fit family. So it's really just that in our communities, your child is my child, and people take
And
care.
I remember in one of the workshops, we asked them the same question, what motivated them, and most of them would say about their past experiences. They're influenced by their past experience, whereby maybe they were helped by a certain person in the community, or they learned from their parents being kind enough to other people in the community. So it's more based into individual in terms of how they want to support the people in the community. I think, as Mary is saying, it's cultural, because most of them were saying how they learn from their parents, and also how when they observe how children maybe need support, and then that motivates them to be there to support their children as well.
And I think it's also important to highlight the fit families. Once they are identified and vetted, they're provided with training. So they're provided training on issues of safeguarding and how to manage behaviors. So they are sort of given some tools to be able to support the children that we work with.
I would think there needs to be rigorous kind of safeguarding the whole way through the process.
And assessments are done both by the government and also by ourselves before we place a child. And follow-ups are also made when that child is placed with a fit family. Then we do follow-ups to ensure that the child is being taken care of. Yes.
Great. So I've asked what your favorite part of the job is. Okay, so accepting kind of the fact that what we really need to do at the moment is to safeguard the work that's going on. If there was an area in which you would like to expand the work and do something else, something new, or just something more, then what might that be?
Can I say more than one?
No. Yes, of course you can.
So I think one is prevention. So I think so far we've been responsive in terms of when children drop on the streets, but in terms of us being able to identify children that are at risk of dropping to the streets and intervening before they actually come to the streets, because we've learned that there are some specific areas that have shown that the majority of children are coming from those specific areas. So for us being able to do some work in those areas, creating awareness, community awareness, providing parenting skills in those communities, so then the children don't have to drop on the streets, because then it takes more time, costs more once a child has dropped on the streets. And another area is, so once a child has dropped on the streets, the family reintegration work that we do. So we, as Mary explained, that we divide our work. There's the intensive and the non-intensive. So, but the children that we get on the street, some of them are coming from long distance districts. So we've not been able to work intensively with families that are coming from long distances, but the issues, it doesn't mean that they don't have as big issues as the ones that are coming from the local distance. So to be able to provide a high level of support to even families that are coming from long distances, so that then the work is sustainable. So even if we reunify a child maybe 1,000 kilometers from where we are, we're still able to ensure that that child gets to remain at home and gets to continue its school. So for us to be able to do more, especially for families that are coming from long distances.
Yeah, so, and well, add there what Mary said. So in terms of the family work, there are families that need therapeutic support, and these families, I'd say it's cost intensive as well. It requires a lot of resources to be able to work therapeutically with these families. But for me, I think some of these families need this therapeutic support because it's difficult for us to give them like just skills. To train them is not going to change them, given the experiences they have gone through themselves. So some of them have a history of street connected. You're speaking with a parent who is a street connected. So when you are telling them, take care of your child, be kind, be nice, they really don't understand what you're saying. So they really need to experience that from someone else to be able to provide the same experiences to their children. So, and I think even though it's a resource, it needs a lot of resources, but the changes it brings after that, because you can imagine if you bring the change to this parent, then they can bring change to all of their children. But if we don't break that cycle, that means their children will also do the same thing. So if you tell me how to expand, is how we could really be able to work more therapeutically with more families. Yeah, so I would suggest that, because it's interesting to know that it's not only the economic part that the parents need. So there's that another part where you need to provide support in terms of healing from previous traumas and the experiences the parents have been through. And for us to be able to really be confident, this parent can really now understand and receive their children's needs and be more attuned, is by providing that therapeutic support.
Yeah, use the key phrase there, breaking the cycle. Which is something that's really key to Railway Children's work, isn't it? To stop these children themselves from growing up and repeating the behaviours that might have led to them leaving. So I'll spring a question on you that I've not briefed you with, sorry. But what about the children themselves? Is there, do you have a specific kind of memory of a particular child that you think about sometimes?
Yeah, so there are a lot of children, for example. So there's this one child, I don't know, sometimes I take it very personal. He was very young when he came into our program. He was 9, if not 10. So there were some, he was living with his grandmother after both parents died. Yeah, so he was living with the grandmother, and this grandmother was suspected to be a witch by people in the community. And in that community, if people suspect you are a witch, they kill you. So he witnessed his grandmother being killed in front of him. So this was, I really remember this case every time. So imagine you're 10 years old, not having parents, being here with a grandmother who is providing care, taking care, then observing that is all taken away. So I remember about that child, but the thing that I'm happy with, we were able later to identify his brother, and we were able to reunify him with his brother. And he's now in school, And it, again, as Mary was saying, it's a long distance family. It has been difficult to really support him very closely, but we have been trying. So we are happy he's back into school and he's living with his brother, and he's happy again. So this is another thing that I'm thinking, what about if we were not there? What would have happened to this 10-year-old?
Yeah, and being in school is so important for good outcomes, isn't it? Getting that good education for him will make a huge difference. So.
Yeah, but also getting the parental support, either not the parents, but someone caring,
family.
The family.
Yeah.
Because if you would just be on the street without any support, we don't know what would happen to him when he grew up. So to at least find someone who was there to support him, to again be back to a family and to care and to validate his feelings. And you shouldn't think the world is like the people that killed their grandmother. To know there are good people in the world and they can really care about you. So the world is not all bad, that my parents are not here, now they've taken away my grandmother. I think that is also very powerful.
Yeah. How about you, Mary?
I think for me, one child that I think of is one child that I met on the streets. He was 7 years old at the time.
Wow, that's incredibly young.
Yeah. But I mean, I think what was endearing about him was that he wasn't sad. He was, I mean, with his peers on the streets. I mean, for me, seeing a 7-year-old on the streets, living on the streets, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But it's the way that he had this thing about, he had a very good sense of humor. He has a good sense of humor. He's still alive, sorry. But he had a nickname by then on the streets. It's called Panyarodi. So Panyarodi is a rat of the road.
Okay.
And the reason why was that he was very streetwise at 7 years old.
Even at 7.
Yeah, he was very streetwise. Like he knew places to sleep so he doesn't get because there's also a lot of sexual abuse that happens on the streets, so he knew areas where to sleep to keep himself safe, and he was very wise on how to keep himself safe while on the streets. So now he's back with his family and he's doing well back in school, but I always remember him because of how he was on the streets and the fact that, I mean, for us looking at him at 7-year-old was like, oh my goodness, a 7-year-old sleeping on the streets. But just the way he was, it was, I mean, it motivates. But I know now that he's in a family-based care.
That's great.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to forget, isn't it, to think about kind of the trauma that children have to go through, but ultimately they're children. They are children. They have that sense of play. They need that. So it's so brilliant the work that RCA are doing and helping children like that to get back into family-based care. And we've not even touched on youth associations. Helen, would that be helpful for us to talk about older children for a little while, or are we running out of time? Yeah, go for it. Okay, so for older children, for 15 and above, what's the process for supporting them? You talked about it briefly about economic empowerment earlier on, but how does it work in practice?
So with the older youth, young people, 15 to 19, the focus is providing them life skills to facilitate the behavior change. So we have a model, it's called the Youth Association model. It's a group model. So how we approach the older youth on the streets is we identify informal groups on the streets, and we support them to sort of formalize and become a group, what call them as a youth association group. And the idea is for us to support them in a group setup. So it's a very participatory process, and also it's also meant for peer-to-peer support. So not really relying on the organization, but also relying on each other and supporting each other through the process. And we focus on providing a lot of life skills through the youth association model. For example, the youth, because of the number of years they've been on the streets, you find most of them are struggling with drugs and substance abuse. They are at very high risk of HIV. So we do provide a lot of life skills in terms of drug and substance awareness, HIV, conflict management, because they are continually engaging in conflict, decision-making, life skills. And it's a stage-by-stage process. So we have the formation stage where the group is very much not very organized. They're still trying to figure them out, set up their own rules of engagement. So we also have the capacity building stage, and that's where we really focus on the life skills. And the aim of the capacity building stage is behavior change. Because given the number of years they've been on the streets, they've acquired some risky behaviors, behaviors that are sort of keeping them on the streets and also endangering their own lives. So we focus on behavior change process. And then after the behavior change process, that's when we do provide now the economic empowerment support. And the economic empowerment support we provide we have 3 options for them, but we do help them to be aware what is marketable, what are the options that are available for them, so they can make an informed decision. And so we either provide in terms of vocational support or business or apprenticeship. So our youth gets to make a decision. For example, if they want to do carpentry, they can either go to a vocational college. They're like technical colleges where they go either 3 or 6 months, and then after we do provide like a startup kit. So a startup kit is tools, a set of tools. So for example, if somebody who is doing tailoring, they'll get a sewing machine. If somebody is doing mechanic, they'll get a toolbox. So to help them either become self-employed or actually get employment through the local businesses. Apprenticeship, how we do the apprenticeships is the youth themselves identify somebody in the community that is doing something that they would like to learn. And then we go and formalize that relationship. And then that youth is actually placed there to learn. And we do provide them transport and lunch while they are attending that apprenticeship. And the reason why we provide transport and lunch allowance is because to ensure that they can be able to commit.
So it doesn't cost them anything.
Because otherwise they'll be on the streets trying to survive, so to ensure that they can be able to focus on the learning, on the skills learning, rather than thinking of, where am I going to eat? So at least for that period of time. And also we do also provide temporary housing, because it's very difficult for you to wake up and go attend a vocational training while you're still going back on the streets. So but the housing is temporary, and it's an agreement between us and them. And the idea is that once they complete the training or the placement, then we're able to support them to get employment, and they can be able to sustain the housing for themselves through the income that they get.
And does it work?
It works. In some cases it doesn't, but at least I would say 75% it works. Where it doesn't work is if a youth is really struggling with substance abuse, because it takes longer for them to really get to a point where they are completely off. So for you, of the drugs or the substance. So for you that are really sort of addicted, the process is much longer.
But we can still get there eventually. It just takes much more time.
It just takes much more time. And for the youth, actually the girls tend to do very well. They go through the process quite fast. And because also the girls that we work with you find that they have young children.
Something like 30% of the girls we work with have children.
So I think they have a sort of a drive to ensure that the children, their babies, don't grow up on the street. So the girls tend to do very well through the process.
Hello, welcome back to Railway Children Africa's office in Dar es Salaam. We're back just for a moment because I forgot to ask a really important question. Mary, I wanted to ask, how did Railway Children Africa's work have to adapt during the pandemic?
Yeah, so COVID really pushed us to be more creative, especially in ensuring that project beneficiaries we keep the services, continue the services, keep them safe, as well as educate them about COVID and how to take care of themselves to keep themselves safe. So as an organization, we for just our first responsibility was to keep our staff safe while they're still providing services. So ensuring that every staff was educated on how to keep themselves safe and also be provided with the tools they needed. So face mask, sanitizers, and also the awareness on what other precautions they need to take to keep themselves safe. And the same was done for our project beneficiaries. So what we utilized technology in terms of phone calls. So normally before COVID would visit families, make follow-ups to families to conduct the sessions at the family level, at the
So
home.
it'd all be face-to-face?
Yeah, it would be face-to-face sessions. But during COVID, we relied mostly on phones. And so for some of the families, we had to buy basic phones for them to ensure that we could reach them. So we provided them with basic phones so we could make phone calls to find out how they are doing. And also they could reach us as well. If they had a crisis, for example, they could call us and we'll try and make it sure that we reach to them if they were in a crisis. Also in terms of giving them, so we also got a small grant from FCDO where we were able to provide families with buckets where they could, so buckets with taps and soaps. So in terms of maintaining COVID, taking COVID precautions. So we're able to provide some families with baskets and buckets and soaps to ensure that they were keeping themselves safe, and also educating them about wearing masks and also maintaining the social distancing. So we did, however, make exception for families that were in real crisis to go for physical visits, and the physical visits will be informed as the level of risk that we felt the family was at. But while we did the visits, we'll observe, of course, COVID precautions. We'll ensure that the family is safe and our staff are safe, ourselves are safe, and also and especially the children. And also because our work, main part of our work is providing services for children while they're still on the streets. So what we did is to utilize more of the outdoor, providing outdoor sessions where we'll make sure that we have the facilities where children could wash their hands, or even sanitizers. They'll have access to sanitizers, face masks, and also it was an opportunity for some of the youth that we are supporting, an economic opportunity for them, because some of them actually were making face masks and selling them.
Okay, so they started businesses.
From that. On the other side, there are some also youth that were affected due to COVID. So there are some businesses that completely collapsed. These are youth that we have supported to be able to become self-reliant. So we've had to give them a top-up in terms of business grants so they could still recover from the impact of COVID. Same with families. So there are some families that we had supported them with business grants. And so when COVID hit, their businesses collapsed. And so we also had to provide them top-up to be able to support their families and to support their children, especially the ones that were in school. So, and we also with the youth work, because we do conduct a lot of life skill sessions. So those life skill sessions were mainly have been mainly done outside, and ensuring with those social distancing, and also that while we are doing those sessions, we would focus on starting the sessions with COVID awareness, the precautions that we need to take to keep themselves safe and ourselves safe. Also, another thing that we got to do during COVID was we got, as part of the FCDO grant, they gave us funds that we were able to set up washing facilities in areas where majority of the street connected children and youth are found. So we would set up wash facilities, and it worked out very well, because not only the children, not only were the children benefiting, but also the communities around those areas. So it will be in marketplaces. And which was also quite sustainable, because the community then took up the running of those facilities, and the children continue to access the wash facilities in these hotspots. So yeah, I think that's how we've been able to, we've learned. And also I think one of the things that came clear to us, that it forced us to see that, I mean, there are other ways of being able to support families, not just face to face. So which also, in terms of going forward, in terms of doing things in a cost-effective way, is something that we have adapted. Yeah.
So yeah, it was. There's a lot of ways that Railway Children has adapted to deal with the extra conditions of the pandemic. And are you carrying on doing phone support for some, or is it now mostly face to face again and kind of back to normal?
So it's, yeah, I think now things in Tanzania, things are getting back to normal now. I think most we are able to do physical visits. So for the long distance cases, we are still relying on with phone support. But for the local cases, we are doing face to face. But we still have to observe COVID precautions when we visit families.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I wonder if I can just ask you another question I just remembered, which was, do you have anything you would like to say to the supporters of Railway Children while you have the opportunity?
Oh yeah, so I think just to appreciate the support that you've been able to provide for us, and because I think we will not be able to do what we do without the support that you've been giving to us, and to know that it's going to it's changing children's lives, youth lives, family lives, and it's, I mean, and the impact, the long-term impact that it's having in terms of when we're breaking these cycles of a child who would have grown up in the streets, or even not even made it to grow up on the streets because of the risks that are on the streets, and now they have a chance to be reunited with their families, grow up in a family, and hopefully break the cycle for their children. So we are really, really grateful that we're able to do what we do because of your support. And yeah, and if you're in Tanzania, we welcome you to come and see our work, and we'll take you to the field, go on the streets, meet the children, and also the families that we work with and the youth that we work with. So asante sana.
Asante sana. Yeah, thank you for all your support, and thank you again for giving me your time and being so generous with your time, so that the supporters of Railway Children can learn a bit more about the work of Railway Children Africa. So asante sana.
Asante.